Ladies and gentlemen, now for the slightly different format that I promised you. The EPP launched its audiovisual sector with its channel on YouTube, but also with its own interactive online TV station called Dialogue TV, in a bid to get closer to the citizens. Already with 20,000 visitors per month, it's been a good start. You already saw the fruits of its labor at the beginning of the Congress with a few video clips, and now we'd like to invite you for a closer look. We went out onto the European streets and asked citizens their points of view and any questions they might have for our leaders. During this next part of the Congress, I would like to ask some of our opposition leaders to kindly join me on the stage to listen to these questions and to share their points of view with us today. Now, to take on the first questions, I'd kindly like to ask Mr. Viktor Orbán, leader of the Fidesz party in Hungary and EPP vice chairman. Mrs. Maria Ferreira-Leite, leader of the PSD party in Portugal. And Mr. Enda Kenny, leader of the Fine Gael in Ireland and also EPP vice president. The lady in the middle. Now, the first questions that the citizens actually asked us related to the biggest challenge that we're facing today, of course, the economic crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Angela Merkel. So the first questions that the citizens asked us related to the biggest challenge we're facing today, the economic crisis. Let's have a listen at what they had to say.
I'd like to know what would be the advantage of the Lisbon Treaty in such a crisis.
Please tell us, what is Europe doing to solve economic crisis, especially in Central and Eastern Europe?
J'aurais voulu savoir quels avantages les pays européens avaient-ils d'être dans la zone euro.
So, Mr. Kenny, for the first question. The Irish people rejected the Lisbon Treaty, and partly perhaps due to a lack of understanding. Could you today explain the Lisbon Treaty, why we need it, and how it could be useful in our current situation?
Well, the Irish people did reject the Lisbon Treaty by a very narrow margin. I think since then there's been a change of attitude in the Irish people's thinking, principally arising from the financial crisis internationally and Irish people's understanding of the strength of the European Central Bank and where Ireland would be had we not that support. I believe also that Irish people now understand the fundamental requirement for an architecture within the European Union to deal with the problems and the challenges that face our future of 500 million people. That's the essential challenge. When Europe had 15 countries and a population of 250 million, its political architecture was able to cope with that. It's now got 500 million people and absolutely phenomenal potential. It needs, therefore, the architecture to be able to cater for that. I believe very strongly that the Irish people on the next occasion will endorse the Lisbon Treaty very strongly indeed.
We do hope so. Mr. Orbán, for our second question as our representative from Central Europe, what do you think of what Europe is doing to help the fragile economies and what still needs to be done?
First of all, may I say that it's extremely difficult to speak on Central European horizon when you are a Hungarian. If you read the interviews and listen to what's going on in Central Europe, you can identify always Prime Minister comments that they would like to separate themselves and their countries from Hungary for a good reason. We cannot say it's unfair. So the Central Europeans don't like to be mentioned together with the Hungarians. So it's difficult to me to answer on a Central European horizon, but probably I would make at least two remarks on the Central European horizon. The first is that we suffer a lot, especially because our economies are integrated into the European economy, but our financial systems are not integrated into the European financial system. So I'm speaking on behalf of the countries which are part of the European Union, but are not part of the eurozone. So, and some decisions made by the European Union neglected and sometimes was harmful for the Central European countries because they disclosed to obtain euro for the Central European markets from the banks. So what the European Union should do for the Central European countries, putting aside the financial assistance, is to provide a chance for the financial institutions of the Central European countries to obtain euros. Otherwise, our economies cannot recover from the present situation.
That leads me very nicely, actually, onto our third question. Talking about the eurozone, the young gentleman there asked basically, what's the advantage of the euro and being in the eurozone country? Mrs. Ferreira-Leite, perhaps you could enlighten us on this.
Yes, I think that it's a rather up-to-date question because of this troubled time that we are living in. I think in summary, I would say that the strength of euro is in the rules that are behind it. And this has consequences that we are with low levels of inflation and low levels of interest rates. Very good for the investment and for the European trade. And so those countries who are deal with euro are protected from many imbalances, economic aspects that are very bad for the economic development. So I think that it's very, very good that we have something that helps us to live in a quite comfortable situation that gives room to the public sector to make some adjustments in the economic activity, and this is always possible because euro establishes such rules that avoid countries to take measures perhaps not too good for us.
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for due to time restriction. We'd love to enter into a longer debate with you, but thank you very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kenny, thank you very much. Mrs. Ferreira-Leite, thank you. And Mr. Orbán. Thank you.